Says the Bible, text 1, the man knew his wife, the biblical understanding of knowing, intimacy, Chava and Eve. She conceived and gave birth to Cain. She said, I have obtained a man with God. All right, she gave birth again, this time to his brother Abel. Abel became a shepherd, while Cain was a worker of the soil. Okay? Abel became a shepherd, Cain's a farmer. Now it's interesting to note that in Hebrew the word for I obtained a man with God is the word kanisi. That's the word in Hebrew, the Bible, kanisi, which is from the word kinyan, which means acquisitions. So he was kind of set forth from his birth, he was going to be in business. He was going to be in acquisitions. He was going to be in contracting. He was going to be a business person, which means he became a farmer, which was the business of the time, of course. It was that type of a society. And he was going to buy and he was going to sell. He was going to be able to dedicate himself to the materialism that the world at that time offered to him, and he became that person. And his very name said, it kind of was a prophecy that he was going to be a Cain from the word kanag, kinyan. That's why she named him Cain, because she says, I obtained a man. Now I also was able to acquire a concept of creativity, Eve says, and having a child, the oldest child, Cain. And she gives birth to this boy, and she names him Cain from the word kinyan, acquisition, businessman. Whereas Abel, we'll soon discuss a little bit further, Hevel, which means a breath, which means he sees the havalim, the emptiness, like a breath of the materialism. In his very name, the word Hevel means a breath, which means something puffy, something immaterial, something insignificant. So right there from his birth, this child gets to be called Cain, which means acquisition, business, the challenge of the business acumen, the business society. And this person says right away, it's Hevel. The whole world is worthless. It's a breath. It's just a breath. It's a puffy, immaterial, and insignificant breath. Okay, so we have here Cain becomes the farmer. Abel becomes the shepherd. All right? And that's the response. Cain decides to dedicate himself to business. Hevel, on the other hand, the shepherd, which means he's not so much dedicated to any particular business. He'll walk out to the fields, to the great green pastures, watch his animals. It doesn't take much business acumen to be out there in the pastures and watch the animals graze and make sure that they don't get lost. Giving him more time to dedicate and invest his time and energy into more things spiritual. As opposed to a farmer, he's very much involved and invested in time and in energy with the land. It's got to produce. There's no time, the luxury that he could just sit back and enjoy the scenery, which a shepherd does have that opportunity and time. So, let me ask you a question. Did someone ask something? I'm sorry.
Wasn't Moshe a shepherd?
Shepherd's a great thing. Abraham was a shepherd, Isaac was a shepherd, Jacob were shepherds. They were all shepherds. All the tribes were all shepherds. It's a good thing. We'll soon talk about the mistake Hevel made as his response to the catastrophe he witnessed, the expulsion from Garden of Eden, in his shepherding. We'll talk about that in a second. It's going to come up. But there's no question about it. Shepherding, we find throughout the Chumash and Torah as the chosen profession of the greatest of the sages. And Hevel started there as well. We'll soon see, however, the error he did make in that choice of profession. We'll make a contrast. So that is the choices that they made. Those were their responses to catastrophe. Hevel detaches from society. He insulates himself from having to be part of the world. He finds the world a very harsh place and runs away from it to a certain extent. Whereas Cain goes ahead and says, you know something, I'm going to detach myself from the spirituality of all the things that he may have seen his parents talk about in the Garden of Eden, and he's going to become much more part of the earthly condition. He becomes part of the farming activity. He becomes a farmer himself. He becomes part of the earthliness that the world, that was his world. So let's see, that's what they became, and let's see how these chosen professions informed their lives. Page 79, text 2. And at the end of some days, Cain brought some of the crops as an offering to God. Listen very carefully. Cain brought the offerings to God first. Cain goes first. It's always troubled me why Cain was the first guy to come and bring the crops, and yet God doesn't respond to his, but responds to the one who comes second. It will also offer some of the firstborn of his flock, from the fattest ones. God paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he paid no heed. God paid heed to Abel. It said before that he brought the firstborn of his flock from the fattest ones. The firstborn representing the better ones, and the fattest of his flocks. So Abel may come second, but when he does give, he gives the best. Cain spent a whole life not bringing sacrifices to his Creator. He spent a whole life immersed in the pursuit of materialism, in detaching himself from anything spiritual, any connection to his Creator. At the end of some days, he decides, you know something, I'm getting older, and I can't work as hard as I used to be able to work, and therefore I may need some divine intervention here. It wouldn't hurt maybe to take some of my plants and put it on an altar, and see maybe that might just help. When does he do this? At the end of some days, the Bible says. He didn't do it his entire life. He comes all of a sudden, as a Johnny come lately, later in life, and he says, let me get God's blessing. Well, God's teaching him a lesson over here. It's not just that you're giving the gift, it's how you give it. It's the thought that counts a lot. And that's an important message that Cain needed to hear and listen to. That he should see his answer, his prayers, his offering not being accepted, and the response should have been, what's wrong with my offering? Where did I go wrong? He didn't do that. He gets angry because Abel's was. So Cain is almost trying to bribe God. He's giving something because at this point I might need something from him, so I'm going to try to gain his grace, gain his favor. And that's where he's coming from. So he came first. Finally, Cain feels compelled to give something to God. I mean, he's had a lot of success. He has what to give. He doesn't give the best. Doesn't give the first. The trumah, the bikurim, that the mitzvah would be to give the first things that grow, the things that ripen the best and the first. He doesn't do that. He picks some stuff and he gives it to God. Comes first because he realizes. Abel says, that's not a bad idea. And he says, maybe I should also offer a gift to God. And he comes second. And that's a mistake. He pays for his life with this mistake, by the way. But it's a mistake that he does make. Abel, in his spiritual quest, made the mistake. And sometimes we may always make this mistake. That truly spiritual success is defined by how otherworldly I become. How I detach myself from materialism completely, that I see no value in anything physical or materialistic at all. It's my heart, it's my soul, it's my mind, my emotional energy, and that connects me to my Creator. My firstborn flock, the fat ones, does God really want that? Why bother with the physical things of this world and make them part of the godly reality, a sacrifice to God? Where does that come from? In his detachment from society, in his insulation, he made the tremendous error that he went completely over the other side and expressed his spirituality only in spiritual terms. Never brought a sacrifice to God. He sees his brother and it says to him, hold on a second, there's some value there perhaps in taking, but once this fellow Abel gives, he gives the best because he's a spiritual person. Once he learns the value of giving, he sees that maybe I should give, and not only should I give, but I probably won't just give something that I have, because everything that I have really should be godly, and he takes the best, the firstborn of his flock, and he gives the fattest of his flock, and he gives it to God. So that's why Abel is also wrong. They both lived in extreme levels that both were incorrect, were both wrong. This was their response to catastrophe. Expelled from Garden of Eden, and that's how they dedicated their lives, one pursuing materialism, the other pursuing spirituality, both to ends that were destructive, both to ends that were incorrect. Cain doesn't come to God till later in life. It was till the end of days. And Abel never comes to God with his physical things. He was completely spiritual. His mind, his heart, his soul, his emotions were completely there. He was a shepherd meditating 24/7. But he never brought an animal sacrifice. He never brought something of his things to God as a gift to God. He said, what kind of connection can there be between my physical properties and God? But then he sees Cain doing this, and it rings a bell with him. Maybe there is some point to that.